Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner.
Welcome back. And those of you that are new, welcome. From the Epic Times, tens of thousands rally against abortion and first march for life since Roe v. Wade was overturned. Now, I'm old enough to remember when Roe v. Wade was ruled out by the Supreme Court. I believe it was 1972. I was still in high school, and I remember, and it was a big deal at the time, and it's been controversial ever since. I'm not going to go into some of the morality parts of it, because that's a really dicey subject, and it's going to take a long time to explain. But the Roe v. Wade ruling was just bad, was a bad ruling, period. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it was bad because it was never made into legal legislation. It was just an opinion of the court. Now, the court didn't rule against legislation, didn't rule for it. It just said a woman's right to an abortion at the federal level. Now, we could talk about which I am against, taxpayer-funded abortions, and many other things. But this is about overreach of the federal government. And think about this for a minute. If the Democrats, especially the progressive Democrats, were so keen on making this the law of the land to have an abortion, then why in 50 years, with all the number of times that the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives had a clear majority of Democrats, and that's been a number of times in 50 years, why didn't they ever pass legislation for a woman's right to choose? It never passed. The House of Representatives is the people's representatives. And the people decided no, because they couldn't come up with the votes. Congressmen theoretically represent their constituents, or at least the majority of them. And in 50 years, they have never, ever passed legislation to make abortion the law of the land. And that was the trap. Democrats have always used the judicial system to push through legislation that couldn't be passed in the legislative chambers, i.e. state and federal government. Republicans, not so much. And that was the trap. That was the flaw in Roe v. Wade. We finally had a Supreme Court that ruled, I believe rightfully so. This has nothing to do with the morality or immorality of abortion. The overturning of Roe v. Wade was simple as this. The federal government does not have the right to say it's a constitutional right for an abortion without legislation. And the Democrats are famous for that. Think of all the COVID lockdowns and all the governors. And I live in upstate New York. I'm in a deep blue state. I'm behind enemy lines here. And I'll tell you the truth, they went beyond their constitutional authority, even on their state constitutions, let alone the U.S. Constitution. Democrats always, always, always push it as far as they can. It was unlawful what most of the governors did in the lockdowns and then the extensions. They have emergency powers, and that's all. In this state of New York, I used to be involved in local politics. I used to be a city councilman years ago. I know some people in Albany. I know some assembly members. I know a New York State senator. I know a couple of them. And none of them voted for the extension of the lockdowns. It was just done without legislative approval. And it's illegal and unconstitutional, just like Roe v. Wade was without legislation. That's my 2 cents on the legality part of it. Tens of thousands of people gathered in the District of Columbia on Friday to demonstrate their opposition to abortion. It's the anniversary of Roe v. Wade is why they were doing it. In the first annual March for Life since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and delivered a long-sought victory for the pro-life movement. All the Supreme Court said is they did not say, when people put emotions into legislation or policy, it always ends up a disaster. This is straight out saying Only the states have the right to regulate abortion. Period. It did not outlaw abortion at all. Now you're saying, well, John, you know, some of the states, the laws are so draconian, you might as well say they banned it. Well, that's up to the state legislatures. They're the people's representatives. Doesn't mean you can't go somewhere else and get one. And to be honest with you, the deep blue states have the majority of the big cities, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. I mean, we go through the whole list. And they will their abortion policies will change zero. Participants across a section of the National Mall to hear speeches and later took part in a march. It's a child, not a choice. Now they're talking about the morality of abortion, which frankly I personally agree, but that has nothing to do with law. Supreme Court ruled 5-4. It should have been 6-3. In Dobbs v. Jackson's Women's Health Organization, ruling there's no constitutional right to abortion, and thus returning the regulation of the abortion to the states. They told these morons, they told these leftist progressive Democrats, when I believe it was I forget what state it was in the South, that tried to put some regulation on abortion, and so they sued Women's Health Organization. They sued, and it ended up going to the Supreme Court, and everybody told them, don't do it. Roe v. Wade is flawed. It's a flawed ruling, period. Don't push it. Wow, we're right. Okay. Well, you pushed it, and look what happened. Now, it's funny, when Barack Obama had the House and the Senate, did you see any federal laws being passed for abortion? Nope. How about Bill Clinton? Nope. How about Joe Biden? He had all three chambers. Nope. Why? Because the American people, the majority of them, don't agree, or abortion on demand, period. I'm going to breeze through this. It's a long article. You can stop the video and read it if you want to. You know, there's protections for the unborn. There's trying to laws being passed that you can't abort a baby if it has Down syndrome and other things you don't like. It's basically eugenics. And that's the part that people don't get. This is the modern version of eugenics, being the vast majority of abortions in the United States or in poor, low-income, and many times black so-called neighborhoods. It's eugenics, just polished up. You know, if you paint a turd white, it's still a turd. It doesn't change it. Elsewhere in Washington, President Biden delivered a counterpoint by issuing a proclamation. Oh, a proclamation. Why didn't you push for an abortion law your first week as president? Because you knew the votes weren't there and the American people didn't want it, because progressive Democrats use the courts as legislative body when that's not their function. Roe v. Wade is a balanced decision that protected women's constitutional right to choose. There is no constitutional right to have an abortion, just like there's no constitutional right to have a driver's license. You say, well, John, how can you compare the terminating of a pregnancy with a driver's license? Under the law, it's really the same. You can't put a motion in the legislation. You just can't. You can hold the Constitution up to the light. You can put lemon juice on it. It's not in there, okay? It's not. It's either pass a national law or the states get to decide, and that's what the Supreme Court said. They didn't say abortion was illegal. They just said the way the court ruled was unlawful. Today, trailblazers who fought heroically for Roe v. Wade decision are watching the next generation grow up without its protections. Then should have passed a federal law. You were vice president for 8 years. First 2 years, you and Barack Obama, I would be respectful and say President Obama, could have passed a law, a federal law. You chose not to. Why? Because the votes weren't there. Biden said he would use his executive powers where possible, which is nowhere, to preserve abortion. Now, it only gets dicey when you get laws like, say I live in Alabama, we'll say, I'm just picking the state out of the air, with very restrictive abortion laws. And I'm, we'll say, 2 months into my pregnancy, 6 weeks, whatever. I can't have one in Alabama. and I want to travel somewhere in a state that allows it. Well, some of these states are passing laws saying that person will be held accountable in a court of law for breaking the abortion law. That legally can't be done. You can't do that. Just like if you lived in a state that said possession of marijuana is unlawful, and you drove to another state and smoked marijuana and then came back, they'll arrest you for smoking marijuana in another state. We'll say, John, marijuana and abortion isn't the same. Yeah, legally it is. It is. So these states can't pass these laws. Since the Supreme Court ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade, the legality of abortion has become a matter for states to decide on, with around a dozen implementing near-total abortion bans. That's true. And then up to Friday's March for Life, congressional Republicans issued a flurry of anti-abortion bills. It's not a flurry. I mean, look at this. Lauren Boebert, love her or hate her, she's right, proposed a new draft bill on Friday that aims to defund Planned Parenthood by placing a one-year moratorium on federal funding to the organization. Just because it's legal to do something doesn't mean the taxpayers have to pay for it. If Planned Parenthood wants to exist under the existing laws of that state, we'll say here in upstate New York and New York State, granted, but they shouldn't get state or federal tax money to do it. I'm sorry. You have to pay for it on your own. But abortions is a big cash cow for Planned Parenthood. And they lie and say, I'm just making this number up, 92 different programs for women. Yeah. But the one that makes 99% of your income is abortion, so save it. The nation's target largest abortion provider has no business receiving taxpayer dollars. That's true. Planned Parenthood claims that these funds go to health care for women, but last year Planned Parenthood afforded a record number of abortions while also reducing the number of women exams and breast cancer screenings it performed. The bill named the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2023 aims to prohibit federal funds from being made available to the organization or any of its affiliates or clinics unless they certify they will not perform abortions. They're not saying they're against abortions. They're saying they're against funding it. Now, they may personally be against abortions. That's a different issue. Exceptions are made for abortions in case of rape, incest, or when the woman's life is in danger. There is no state in this country, no matter how draconian, even long before Roe v. Wade, that if the life of the mother is threatened, that a termination of the pregnancy wasn't done. Even 100 years ago, that was done. So let's cut through the BS, and they're going to be coat hangers and back alleys. That's a lie. Planned Parenthood replied to the request for comment from the Epoch Times by reporting the organization's response to prior defund initiatives, which states that such moves kept patients from receiving preventive services, like birth control and screenings for cancer and STDs, which is less than 1% of the revenue. It's a smoke screen. And this is something that's interesting. They have the abortion pill. The Tele-Abortion Prevention Act would mandate that individuals seeking an abortion pill must have a physical exam, take the medication on the site at the clinic, and attend a post-treatment visit. I don't have a problem with that. You're basically causing a miscarriage. That is a lot of stuff going on physically, not even counting the emotionally or mentally part of it. Those are powerful chemicals and powerful drugs. Just to get it off the counter and go home and watch a TV show and take it and go to work the next day isn't quite that simple. And then, of course, he goes on to say abortion is wrong. I'm talking about the fact that it should be done under the supervision of a doctor. Remember that one? Don't get between a person and their doctor. And then I'm going to go through. There's a few of these, how individuals will seek abortions when their fetus, baby, embryo, whatever you want to call it, I call it a baby, has Down syndrome. And so the abortion is done. That, folks, is eugenics. And look up eugenics from the 1900s. And I'm going to leave it off with this because I think we got the point. Look up eugenics. The person that started Planned Parenthood was a huge eugenics proponent. Margaret Sanger said, we do not want to exterminate blacks in this country, meaning in the United States. We want them to slowly die on the vine, i.e. stop reproducing. And over the time, their numbers will get smaller and smaller and smaller until blacks are erased from America. That is the founder of Planned Parenthood. And those of you that think CRT and all that stuff is at university level and trans issues are now mainstream science. Eugenics was taught in every college. It was huge. Every single university, top university, taught eugenics. And it was advocated for by top scholars and historians. Now we look back on those people with disgust and disdain, as we should. How are people going to see the pro-abortion, pro-trans for children, CRT, 50 years from now? They're going to look down on you as the monsters that you think the slaveholders were. Think about that for a minute. And until next time, goodbye and good luck.